Life is full of chance. Even life itself is a chance, and there are numerous possibilities for great things to happen, but that also applies for potentially bad things. We're one of billions of people put on this planet, each with their own individual set of chances. By chance, we come into contact with a few of these different people in our lives. Some become friends, acquaintances, family, lovers, or it could be people we share limited interaction with, such as a cashier, or perhaps it's just people we're walking by on the street. So it's pretty great to know that your path could intersect with the paths of numerous good-hearted people in the world. However, what are the chances that one of those paths might be that of a serial killer? When it comes to the probability of encountering a serial killer, there are numerous factors to take into consideration. From where you live and how many people you interact with daily to how long you live, a lot goes into determining your chances of meeting these sorts of human beings, whether casually or more intimately. For starters, if you live in the United States, your chances of meeting a serial killer are higher than many other developing countries, with America being home to almost 67% of known serial killers in the world, and that's just the ones that we know exist, meaning those we have identified are behind bars or are deceased. As for those we don't know, it's hard to say how many are walking the streets unidentified. For this video, we will calculate the probability for those living in the United States in order to be as accurate as possible. Serial murders account for around 1% of all murders in the US, with the FBI estimating that there are between 25 to 50 active serial killers at a time during a given year. However, many speculate that this is a low average. According to data gathered by Dr. Mike Abbott at Radford University, a high number of previous years have had as many as 170 active serial killers at one time. Again, these are just the ones we most likely know about, and not those who have yet to be discovered or have been going unnoticed for their crimes for years. Unlike other types of criminals, serial killers rarely stand out in a crowd in a way that would arouse suspicion. Despite our inclination to see the typical serial killer as a misfit who lives alone with strange mannerisms that would make them easy to spot, many fit well into regular society, often having a family and gainful employment. Dennis Rader, better known as the BTK killer, who killed 10 victims around the Wichita area, was described as being an average family man and father of 2. On top of this, he was a Boy Scout leader, served honorably in the U.S. Air Force, and was employed as a local government official, and he was even president at his church. Years after the murders, Rader's daughter, Carrie, described the man that she knew as her father to be attentive, often taking her fishing, hiking, and camping, all the while never knowing the life her father led outside of the home. Apart from leading seemingly average lives, many of them can also be incredibly intelligent. Instead of appearing weird and off-putting, many come across as charming, causing their victims to place more trust in them. Probably the most famous example would be Ted Bundy, whose intelligence and articulate nature allowed him to get close to his victims. And while most of the world's serial killers operate in the United States, not all states pose the same opportunity. While large states like California and Texas boast high numbers of serial murders, it is some of the smaller, more rural states that have the most serial killers when adjusted for population differences. In fact, Alaska has the most serial murders per million people, despite that we have less data in a shorter amount of time. Making up many of those murders was Robert Hansen, who raped, tortured, and murdered young women for most of the 1970s. Much like other serial killers, Hansen led a normal life of respectability with his wife and kids, working as a baker and interacting with the public regularly. And with the remote nature of the Alaskan frontier at his side, he was able to conceal many of the bodies in remote grave sites, taking them deep into the wilderness in his small airplane. So you understand a serial killer could blend into the public and be anywhere pretty much at any time. So what do the numbers say? What are your chances of encountering one? Well, we have to determine first a few factors. For this, we will be looking at the probability of meeting a serial killer in the US in your lifetime alone. Our country's current population is roughly 320 million people. On average, there are 4.5 murders for every 100,000 people per year, with only 1% being serial murder. Although there are many differing definitions on what makes a serial murderer, we will be using the definition of a person who kills 3 or more people with cooling down periods in between. With this, we find that there are around 57 serial killers in any given year, taking into account both low and high years in the past. So 57 is the magic number that we will use. Out of the 1% of serial murders that happen every year, assuming that each serial killer only kills their 3 respective people in those statistics, serial killers make up around 0.000018% of the US population. On the surface, this seems very small, right? Well, let's look at that number over the course of your life. Whenever you are out and about on your daily routine, let's say you're encountering 3 new people per day. This could be walking down the street, going shopping, or even maybe chatting online. To loosely define our terms, let's say an encounter is either being in close proximity to a person or speaking with them, even if only briefly. The number 3 also takes into consideration the fact that some days you may encounter no one new, and some days you may encounter more than 3 people. That being said, let's talk lifespan. In the US, the average life expectancy is around 78 years. So for every day for 78 years, you continue that trend of encountering 3 new people per day. In one day, you would have a 0.2% chance of meeting a serial killer in your daily life. But in your lifetime, you have a 0.78% chance. So in your whole life, you don't even have a full 1% chance of meeting a serial killer. So you may be thinking to yourself at this point, well, I'm probably never going to meet a serial killer. Whether you're happy or sad about that fact, I'm not sure, but let's break it down a different way. When I say 0.78%, you may feel that barely anyone encounters a serial killer, but let's say it another way. While the probability of meeting a serial killer is a much lower one than, say, dying of heart disease or cancer, your chances of meeting a serial killer are more likely than some other terrifying life experiences, such as being struck by lightning or being attacked by a shark. And while these can understandably be more easily avoided by not swimming in the ocean or going out during a thunderstorm, this chance meeting is more bound to happen than other, more sudden events, including dying in a terrorist-related attack. Unless you're traveling to more hostile areas of the world, your chances of dying in a terrorist attack are 1 in 9.3 million. How many people either already have or very likely will encounter a serial killer? 1 in 128. Makes you put that low percentage into perspective, doesn't it? And of course, this is a probability of you just having a chance encounter with a serial killer, not being their next victim. However, when it comes to when a serial killer wants to kill you, really, we're all pretty much at risk. Like our assumptions that all serial killers fit the profile of being young white men, many often assume that a serial killer's targets are women, often involving sexual crimes as well as murder. However, studies have shown that both men and women are just as likely to be murdered by a serial killer, with neither gender holding a larger advantage, or rather disadvantage, over the other. Many of them also fall around the same age group, so young women are no more likely to be murdered by a serial killer than a young man would be. Perhaps this is because, as the data shows, serial killers are less likely to kill out of purely sexual or material purposes, but rather for power or satisfaction of a kill. So it seems we all have just as much of a chance for fitting the ideal profile of a killer's next victim. And with the world more connected than ever with the internet and social media, our chances of encountering a serial killer are just that much higher. There might even be one watching right this second. Speaking of watching my video, let's say this episode reaches 250,000 views, which it will. Taking the probability we've calculated into account, around 2,000 of you out of that 250,000 will very likely encounter at least one serial killer in your lifetime if you haven't already. Nearly 2,000 of you. Perhaps you may even meet the one that is potentially watching with you right now. Although I would never assume that the people who watch my videos on a regular basis are potential serial murderers. You never know who's watching you online or who you might meet in your lifetime. In the end, it all comes down to chance. And now is the time where I questioned you. I asked on my Twitter, would you ever want to meet a serial killer who hasn't been captured? 44% of you said absolutely, but only if your safety was guaranteed. 28% of you said never, not a chance. 17% of you said possibly, and 11% of you said yes, anytime, any place, regardless of your own personal safety. You can follow me on my Twitter at @TheRobDyke to cast your vote in my weekly Question Everything poll. Special thanks to Victor Farfan, a very skilled statistician, for his assistance on this video. Please be sure to check out his YouTube channel, linked below, where he teaches math. He has also agreed to become an expert for this series, so be sure to show him some love. Thank you for watching. Don't take the chance of missing out on my next episode. Be sure to subscribe to my channel now. And if you'd like to learn more about serial killers, check out my show, Serial Killer Files. That is linked in the description below. And it's very probable that I will see you next Friday. Stay safe.